Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. President Trump issued two statements yesterday criticizing another rhino and the reason why the GOP's lost Georgia. The House passed a controversial H.R. 1 election reform bill, but 20 attorney generals said they will take action if it's signed into law. YouTube has suspended Right Side Broadcasting Network for broadcasting Trump's speech. Xi Jinping considered America as China's biggest threat. Okay, my friends, let us take a closer look together. Last night, former President Trump issued a long statement returning criticism to Republican strategist Karl Rove. A day ago on Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal published Rove's editorial attacking Trump's CPAC speech. Karl Rove was George W. Bush's senior advisor for 2 terms. On the election evening, November 3rd at 10:30 p.m., Rove called President Trump to congratulate him on his win. In Trump's statement, the former president called Rove a rhino of the highest order, and he said he disagreed with so many of the things Rove says. He's a pompous fool with bad advice and always has an agenda. He ran the campaign for 2 senators in Georgia and did a rotten job with bad ads and concepts. Should have been an easy win, but he and his friend Mitch blew it with their $600 versus $2,000 proposal. Karl would have been much more at home at the disastrous Lincoln Project. Trump named a number of name-only Republicans in the past, such as Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, Pat Toomey, and said if the Republican Party is going to be successful, they're going to have to stop dealing with the Rove-like members and let them naturally float away. Rove later tried to exonerate himself in a statement to Reuters. I've been called a lot of things in my career, but never a rhino. I've voted for every Republican president candidate since I turned 18 and have labored only for the GOP candidates since then. But it is not just about who you vote for, it's about who you really support. In another statement issued yesterday, Trump detailed the 2 very reasons why Republicans lost their Senate races in Georgia. The first being many Republican voters did not turn out to vote for their deep disappointment with Georgia Republicans' leadership and Governor Kemp. The second reason being Mitch McConnell was insisting on a $600 stimulus check payment, which couldn't compete with Democrats' $2,000. This has put the GOP Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler in a great disadvantage in the races. Rove was also backing the $600 proposal that in a way helped the Democrats to win in Georgia. Karl Rove is the second name-only Republican member after Mitch McConnell, who Trump exposed exclusively through his statement. We can see the former president has started his political chess match through active endorsement as well as sharp criticism towards weak Republicans. On March 4th, the Senate voted 51-50 on Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. Precisely, it shouldn't be called a relief bill, as only 9% of the dollars go to COVID. Much of the bill is found to be paying off Democrats' own interests, such as sending more than $100 million to a subway in California. Some Republicans called it Pelosi's payoff bill. The bill is now proceeding to a debate on the Senate floor. Senator Ron Johnson on Wednesday pushed a reading out loud process to make sure that every detail of the bill was captured. Johnson thinks that this is not a COVID relief bill. It's a boondoggle for Democrats. It's the Democrats' wish list of setting things up for a more socialist society. He said, "What I want to highlight is how gross this is and how unnecessary it is and how we are mortgaging our kids' futures and we're not even barely thinking about it." The reading aloud process took about 11 hours and finished at 2 a.m., with only Johnson himself remaining to the end. The debate started today at 9 a.m. Although budget reconciliation rules allow for up to 20 hours of debate, Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen asked to debate for only a limited time of 3 hours. In the Senate, bills usually require the support of 60 senators, but the coronavirus relief bill is being advanced under a legislative maneuver known as reconciliation that allows passage with a simple majority vote. The Democrats are aiming at getting the final bill to Joe Biden's desk on March 14th. On March 3rd, the House passed another controversial bill with a tight vote. The 800-page sweeping election reform bill, H.R. 1, also called the For the People Act, passed on a largely party-line vote of 220 to 210. All Republicans voted against the bill, plus one Democrat, Representative Benny Thompson. Thompson said in an emailed statement to the Epoch Times, My constituents oppose the redistricting portion of the bill as well as the section on public finances. I always listen and vote in the interests of my constituents. Here is a summary of flaws or concerns that we found in the election reform bill. The bill imposes new campaign finance rules, including setting up a new optional Freedom from Influence fund for congressional campaigns to encourage small dollar donations. Under the funding program, a candidate would receive a 6-to-1 funding match with contribution of up to $200, meaning a $200 donation will get an extra $1,200 from public funds. The bill restructures the Federal Election Commission as a partisan majority rule campaign regulatory agency, further restricting freedom of speech during campaigns and prohibiting coordination between super PACs and political candidates. It enables incumbent congressmen and their challengers to receive a salary from campaign funds. Regarding voting legislation, it forces states to implement a minimum of 15 days of early voting, offer mail-in ballots, facilitate online voter registration, and allow no excuse absentee balloting. Mail-in ballots received within 10 days after Election Day will be counted as valid. Under the bill, felons are eligible to vote after completing their sentences. The bill creates an independent state commission to handle the congressional redistricting process. Instead of state legislatures, the independent state commission is to be composed of academics, public officials, and private citizens. Democrats say the provisions seek to end partisan gerrymandering, but Republicans argue that it is unconstitutional. This bill will federalize and make permanent many of the questionable election reforms adopted as temporary measures in 2020 by a handful of states in response to the pandemic. Before H.R. 1 was put to vote in the House, a group of 20 Republican attorneys general signed a letter and called on the leaders of both the House and the Senate to consider a number of constitutional flaws in the bill. The letter sent by Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita points to several potential legal flaws in the For the People Act of 2021. The letter states the act would invert the constitutional structure, commandeer state resources, confuse and muddle election procedures, and erode faith in our elections and systems of governance. Despite recent calls for political unity, the act takes a one-sided approach to governing and usurps states' authority over elections. With confidence in elections at a record low, the country's focus should be on building trust in the electoral process. Thinking about the confusion and distrust that the act may exacerbate, the Attorneys General warns that, should the act become law, we will seek legal remedies to protect the Constitution, the sovereignty of all states, our elections, and the rights of our citizens. The H.R. 1 was also harshly criticized by a number of speakers at CPAC, including Trump. He said, "We have no time to waste. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in Congress are racing to pass a flagrantly unconstitutional attack on the First Amendment and the integrity of our elections, known as the H.R. 1. Do you know what H.R. 1 is? It's a disaster. Their bill would drastically restrict political speech, empower the federal government to shut down dissent, and turn the Federal Election Commission into a partisan political weapon. Joe Biden has said that he would sign the bill into law if it reaches his desk. The Capitol Police have requested that the National Guard continue to provide security at the Capitol for another 2 months. Defense officials say the new proposal is being reviewed by the Pentagon. Currently, there are about 5,200 soldiers and airmen supporting civilian law enforcement at the Capitol. Their original employment was set to end on March 12th. The extension request got a sharp rebuke from Republican Senator Jim Inhofe, calling the extension outrageous. Inhofe said safeguarding the Capitol is the Capitol Police's mission, not National Guard's. Democratic Representative Alessa Slotkin said, "None of us like looking at the fencing, the gates, the uniformed presence around the Capitol. We can't depend on the National Guard for our security." Slotkin argued there has to be a plan that provides the needed security for the buildings and personnel by the Capitol Police and local law enforcement. And what do they do to the soldiers safeguarding the Capitol? On Wednesday, it was reported some National Guard soldiers had gotten ill after being served with meat that was uncooked. Michigan's National Guard complained that last Sunday, 74 different meals were found with raw meat in them. Some soldiers even had metal shavings in their food. In January, we reported that the National Guard troops were arranged to sleep in the freezing cold garage, and now they are served with poorly prepared food? If you really feel insecure and want these soldiers to stay and protect you, why wouldn't you take care of them? Now, before we continue, I would once again like to thank all of you who have joined me on this journey. As you already know, YouTube and big tech have been suppressing the conservative voice, and that includes us at The Eye Opener. Please like and share this video so more people can know the truth. And if you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting us. Our donor box link is in the description. Please don't forget to join the email list. That way, if I get deplatformed, I'll be able to stay in contact with you. Okay, thank you, and let's get back to the show. Right Side Broadcasting Network, RSBN, has been suspended by YouTube for 2 weeks because of its broadcast of Trump's CPAC speech. YouTube claimed the video violated their guidelines on election misinformation and removed it from the platform. Trump's 1.5-hour-long speech briefly touched on the 2020 election. RSBN's coverage was approaching 4 million views, the most viewed among all channels broadcasting CPAC on YouTube. However, because of RSBN decided not to censor President Trump and kept his speech intact, YouTube striked the channel on its platform. RSBN said in a tweet, "We try to follow the rules. We don't air certain things that we normally would, but we won't censor President Trump or push back against things he says that, quite frankly, we agree with. But that is a big no-no to the platform." A search on YouTube suggests that other live streams of Trump's speech were also taken down. Earlier this week, YouTube suspended the channel of former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani for the second time. The platform claimed Giuliani had violated its policies in nicotine use and the election, most likely in reference to his promotion of cigars during his videos. But Giuliani has been promoting cigars long before the 2020 election. While conservatives are being censored, Biden just got censored too. On Wednesday, during the virtual event held by the House Democratic Caucus, the White House cut the feed when Joe Biden was saying, "I'm happy to take questions," leaving the sign language interpreter awkwardly smiling alone.
Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if that's what I'm supposed to do, Nance, whatever you want me to do.
Here's another angle of Biden's virtual event when the White House cut the feed.
So I want to thank you all. I really mean it from the bottom. I want to thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if that's what I'm supposed to do, Nance, whatever you want me to do.
Now, who has the authority to cut the president's feed? That's not all. On Wednesday, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators introduced legislation to strip Biden of his war power by repealing both the 1991 and 2002 authorizations for the use of military force in the Middle East. The action was led by Republican Todd Young and Democrat Tim Kaine, and co-sponsors of the bill include Senator Chris Coons, Chuck Grassley, Mike Lee, and Tammy Duckworth. Kaine said in a statement that last week's airstrike in Syria showed that the executive branch, regardless of party, will continue to stretch its war powers. Congress has a responsibility to not only vote to authorize new military action, but to repeal old authorizations that are no longer necessary. There were some telling signs in February of Biden losing power. Joe Biden jumped in to answer a reporter's question about warehousing migrant kids in tents, and Kamala Harris spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And just this Thursday, Harris took calls with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on behalf of Biden. Who is really running our country? According to a new study on Xinjiang published by The Independent, the fundamental goal of the CCP in Xinjiang is to reduce the density of the Uyghur population and to assimilate the Uyghurs into the so-called Chinese mainstream culture by altering the way Uyghurs live and think. The study points out the Chinese Communist Party is essentially doing the same thing to Hong Kong and Taiwan. Its model of suppression is to assimilate dissidents with Chinese communist ideologies, changing not only their behavior, but also their thinking. Herbert Raymond McMaster, the former national security advisor of President Trump, believes Taiwan is Beijing's next major target. Although Taiwan has been an independent political entity for more than 70 years, the Chinese Communist regime regards it as part of its territory and vows to retake it by force if necessary. CCP's invasion of Taiwan could trigger a big war in the world. Under the United States Taiwan Relations Act, Washington has the obligation to make defense services available to Taiwan for self-defense. During the Trump era, arms sales to Taiwan increased, with the US government approving more than $15 billion. But it's hard to say whether the Biden administration would confront Beijing directly on the Taiwanese issue. If the day comes and when the CCP military is attacking Taiwan, will Washington remain in a standby position and shouting strong condemnations without real actions? According to a Wednesday report by the New York Times, the CCP leader Xi Jinping said to a county official recently in northwest China, "The biggest source of chaos in the present-day world is the United States. The United States is the biggest threat to our country's development and security." Now pay attention to the wording here. The Biden administration referred to the Communist China as a challenge, but your counterpart is calling you a threat. Beijing is very hostile to Washington. There's not much time left for Biden to take a tougher position towards the communist regime with real actions. Even Americans are feeling the danger from Beijing. Now, we want to share some poll results of Americans' views on China. Before we do that, we want to make a clear distinction between Chinese people and the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese people are great people. They have a rich culture dating back thousands of years. Yet the Chinese Communist Party is a tyrannical regime which does not respect human rights, even of its own people. The regime has been doing all sorts of despicable things around the world, attempting to establish a new world order subverted to communist rule. This is something which we strongly oppose. The China we are going to refer to in the following poll study means the communist regime. Now, according to a new survey from Pew Research Center conducted during the first week of February, 1 in 3 American adults now view China as an enemy of the United States. Just 9% of Americans consider China a partner, while 55% see it as a competitor, and 34% as an enemy. Among Republican Americans, more than half of all people, 53%, think of China as an enemy. This number with the Democrats is 20%. Compared to 3 years ago, Americans today view China much more negatively. 48% of Americans agree with limiting China's power and influence is a top priority. This is a 16% increase from 32% in 2018. Among Republicans, this number is 63%. The study also shows when thinking about China, 1 in 5 Americans think about human rights or economy. However, interestingly, 70% think human rights is a more important issue, that they believe the US should try to promote human rights in China even at the expense of economic relations with the country. Americans today know more about the CCP's notorious human rights violations thanks to President Trump and people like former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was a strong critic of the communist regime. In an interview on Thursday, Sean Hannity asked Mike Pompeo that if Donald Trump decides not to run for president in 2024, would Pompeo consider getting into the race? Pompeo replied, "I'm always up for a good fight," hinted that the possibility exists. Pompeo served as director of CIA from January 2017 to April 2018. He became the Secretary of State on April 26, 2018. Before that, he was representative from Kansas's 4th District. Hannity also asked the former Secretary of State, do foreign leaders and hostile regimes in China, North Korea, Iran study the US president looking for potential weaknesses? Is there a possible vulnerability for America now with a somewhat weak and frail leader? Pompeo replied, "World leaders and my counterparts all across the world are watching closely. Senior leadership all across the world, they watch every statement that is made. They watch every move. They see what their patterns are like, the kinds of behaviors they exhibit when times are tough and when the pressure is really on." Pompeo suggests the weakness in a country's leader will be easily noticed by other countries. That includes your enemies as well as your allies. When times are difficult, your weaknesses will discourage your allies and only encourage your enemies. And that's it for today, my friends. Please like and share, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Check out these playlists right here for more eye-opening content. You can also follow me on Gab, Parler, and Telegram. Don't forget, please sign up to our email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. Thank you all, and I'll see you next time.